Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of StarterBuild where we take a look at ships and give them a fairly basic loadout to get you going on the reputation or the higher end missions towards the end of the story arcs. Now today we have an interesting episode because it's an exotic build that I did with the Tier 6 Pathfinder, which is the re-release of the Intrepid that came out this past fall/winter. And basically I just want to do a quick tour of the bridge here while you guys are watching, just because it comes with a 3-pack, so it's something that not everybody has of the ship, but it is kind of nice they threw this in for authenticity's sake. And it is actually very cool that they got all the details right here. They have Replicator, which is the account bank, library files, and other captain items over there. We also have the view of the hull as well as the infamous couch, and the bridge looks as good as it could. So, with that being said, we basically want to show you how to make an exotic build with this ship, since the tactical consoles really are the limiting factor of this ship, and make it sort of harder to work with for some people's playing styles. But I'm going to show you how to make that work for you, and hopefully you enjoy the video and learn some things along the way. So I wanted to real quickly go through the 3-pack of Intrepid consoles. So if you do get the 3-pack of ships, you'll get the Tier 4 refit, the Tier 5 retrofit, and the Tier 6 Pathfinder. So those come with the Nadion detonator, which basically it's an active ability. You turn it on, fire a torpedo, and it'll actually cause a photonic shockwave on the explosion of the torpedoes. So that's actually kind of a nice perk, but it's once every 2 minutes, so it's really not practical for most situations. Now the Tier 5 retrofit came with this ablative generator. So what that is it's a giant shell of armor that coats the entire ship, gives you 900 damage resistance rating, and basically blocks out your ability to fire any beam weapons. But you can still fire torpedoes. It's based on what they did in the finale of Voyager, so that's where that came from. Now the Tier 6, they introduced the Aero Shuttle Bay, and this you can put on any of the other Intrepids as well. It's basically a carrier pet that launches from the bottom of the hull under the saucer, and I'll show you here where that is. It basically comes out right here as sort of like an escape pod or a captain's yacht. It just pops out and hunts your targets for you. It doesn't do a lot of extra damage, but it's a nice little extra perk you can have, or an extra person. Now the set does also have bonuses itself. So you have, if you have 2, it increases your shield emitters and shield capacity. If you have all 3, it gives your shuttle the photonic shockwave torpedo ability. Both of those are pretty marginal, so I wouldn't really worry too hard about maintaining those on your ship. The shield emitters is nice, but it's not really a huge improvement. The next thing I wanted to go through with you guys is the secondary deflectors. So what these are basically a perk for the science vessels to be able to play a particular role when going into battle as a team. So the first one that came out with the Dyson Science Destroyer, and that is the Solanae secondary deflector. It's actually a lot like a positron deflector, only an additional one. So it adds to your shield system, shield emitters, and in this case flow capacitors instead of structural integrity. So basically this is just an additional boost to your survivability. It also adds, if you're building sort of a drain boat or a siphon build, then this also allows you to siphon shields off of your enemy when you're siphoning some of the other things. So that's that one. Now the next one is the deteriorating secondary deflector. So this one is made again for your drain abilities. So if you are running a drain boat, you basically will be able to deal 1000 radiation damage every 10 seconds. And that number is actually calculated based on some modifiers that I have going on, like my particle generator skill and some radiation damage boost that I have. So that may not be the same thing that you'll see right off the bat. But in any case, it's a bonus amount of damage that you get by activating those particular abilities for draining. Now the next one is the inhibiting secondary deflector. Now this one is set up for control abilities. So if you were basically trying to do a lot of pushback or basically trap villains in a certain area. So what this does is it causes a after 4 seconds, it causes a one-time damage hit that is 50% shield penetration. So that happens anytime you do jam sensors, tractor beam repulsors, scramble sensors, gravity well, or photonic shockwave. And I'm using most of those abilities on this build, so that's one that I went with. Now the third option is one that not a lot of people are probably going to like because the benefits are kind of marginal. It basically increases the effectiveness of hull heals and reduces damage to your shields based on certain things. So this is something that affects the hazard emitters, mask energy signature, polarized hull, science team, transfer shield strength, and photonic officer. Now that's more if you're going for a heal boat and you're just trying to heal your allies through the battle. So that is essentially the secondary deflectors, and the one that I went with is the inhibiting because I'm making more of a blocking or pushback build. The next piece of the puzzle here is bridge officer abilities. Now this ship is pretty flexible, so you can do with it what you will. But for the Lieutenant Universal, I put a Lieutenant Tactical with a Fire at Will 1 and a Torpedo Spread 2. And the second Lieutenant Tactical, I put someone with Tactical Team 1 and Attack Pattern Beta 1. The Lieutenant Engineering Hybrid Intelligence seat, which I haven't really messed with the intelligence abilities too much, but this one I just put Emergency Power to Shields and Engineering Team 2. Those are my go-to heals, especially with power levels the way they are with science builds. With science builds, ideally you want full aux power at all times, as well as full weapon power. But you also want to run pretty much minimal engine and shield power, and let the warp core efficiency skill take care of filling the blanks. As long as it's over 50%, then you're basically getting at least some energy out of the engines and shields there. And for everything else, if you do need a shield boost, that's the emergency power to shields is for. So that aside, we go to our science bridge officers here. So what they do is these guys are going to be triggering that radiation damage from the secondary deflector. So the jam targeting sensors is going to do that, where it basically disables a villain, and then 4 seconds later will cause that radiation damage. Science Team 2 we have here as the main shield heal. There are 2 copies of tractor beam repulsors too, one on each science bridge officer, and that is basically to keep pushing people back, which is good for crowd control. In addition to that, it'll cause the kinetic damage and the radiation damage from the secondary deflector. We also have Gravity Well 3. Now normally you can train Gravity Well 2 from a bridge officer trainer. Gravity Well 3 comes from a manual which you can make if you're a science captain, or you can actually buy it off of the exchange, or from anyone you know in your fleet, or if friends that play the game and so forth. But in any case, Gravity Well 3 deals more kinetic damage and more gravitational pull than Gravity Well 2. And then the last one we have here that activates the secondary deflector ability is the Tractor Beam 2. So of course this, as a Tractor Beam, keeps the opponent in place. Now if you happen to have the duty officer that turns this into a shield drain as well, then that will be an extra bonus for shield damage. But also, that is more of an ability that would be better on a drain boat, because with the flow capacitor skill higher, it's going to drain shields faster. The next piece of the puzzle here is to see how to maximize 2 tactical consoles without getting fleet consoles, because the focus of this build is to stay within the parameters of just using mission rewards for the most part. Now, the first thing that I found that struck me was the Tactical Console Harmonic Resonance Relay Mark 12. So that's actually part of the Preserver Resonant Technologies. It's from the newer mission called Blood of the Ancients. I think it came out as a featured episode in May. If you're able to play that at level 50 as a featured episode, great, because that means you probably already have the set. If not, you may have to wait until level 60 to be able to play that, just because of the minimum requirements of the level at that point. So, this console, what this does is it gives you 20% disruptor damage, 20% transphasic projectile weapon damage, and 4% armor penetration. All of those are very good things, especially on one console. So with that in mind, I wanted to maximize the transphasic projectile weapon damage, since I'm going to be using those. So what I did is I used the 2-piece Breen set as well, So from that set, you can use any two except for the deflector. That's the key part that you want from a different set. We'll get to that. Now the super cooled impulse engine here is from the Breen set, and that combined with the warp core, which was a winter reward from the winter event that you had to get certain resources for. These combined will give you 35 transphasic projectile weapon damage. Now that's something you get if you are combining the engine with the shield for lack of having the warp core. You're welcome to do that. That's a mission reward from the Breen story arc there. So that is definitely something obtainable without using reputation or a whole lot of time or resources. Now, the transphasic weapons that I have on this ship are the Breen Transphasic Cluster Torpedo. This one has 20% bonus shield penetration, which is definitely nice. But those mines actually have up to 40% shield penetration. So that's definitely nice. Now the other piece of the Resonant set, or the Preserver Resonant Technologies, that is the Resonant Transphasic Torpedo Launcher. So this also has 40% bonus shield penetration and over 3,900 kinetic damage, so that's pretty great. And on hit, it has that 33% chance of the Resonant Disruption Wave, which is 576 physical damage based on my configuration here, which is 100% shield penetration. Now, with people having hulls of over 50,000, that's not really significant, but it's something to go for. Now, the third piece of that set is a Resonant Disruptor Beam Array, Mark 12. So these are unupgraded, that's just how they come from the mission. And this is basically a disruptor build because of the disruptor damage boost from that harmonic resonance relay. So the three-piece bonuses from this, in addition to what are on the stats for the weapons themselves, are that with two of them you get the 3.6 weapon power setting increase, as well as the disruption wave increase energy damage delta shields by 15. So if you're using the beam, it'll increase the disruption wave's effectiveness by 15% essentially, if you get that critical hit. Now the harmonic firing enhancement matrix is what makes this set kind of interesting. It lets you apply a 4% stacking firing cycle haste. It'll stack up to 10 times. So it'll give you 15% bonus damage, which is awesome when you get to that 10 stacking point. But what this is, the firing cycle haste is a reduction of the amount of time it takes for the beam weapons or projectiles to regenerate. So it's a lowered cooldown for those, up to 40% lower when you're stacking 10 of them. So if your cooldown was 2 seconds between volleys of your beams, they'll now be closer to, like a second and a half, or what have you. So, or a second and a quarter. In any case, that's that. It's kind of a nice bonus. That is an active ability here that you have to activate manually. So just food for thought. Now, with that being said, since we are using Disruptor, I'm using this Counter Command Multi-Conduit Energy Relay Mark 14. So what this does is it amplifies radiation damage, which is dealt by the secondary deflector, so that's a huge bonus. It deals disruptor damage, and when combined with another console from the Undine set, or the Counter Command Ordnance set, which is this one, that two-piece bonus grants you an additional 7.5% disruptor damage or phaser damage to this figure here. So you're getting roughly 40% disruptor damage between that and the other console, as well as 55% transphasic projectile weapon damage between this console and that two-piece space set. So having two consoles and getting 40% disruptor damage and 55% transphasic weapon damage boosts, that's pretty huge. So that's how I maximize those. Now this Undine console here, the Hydrodynamics compensator, that does come from the Undine reputation, so that is going to take a little bit of grinding. The Undine rep is probably the easiest one to get all of the pieces for, just because you go into that Undine space battle zone, you just kind of play around in there for a little while. You'll eventually get the marks and the dilithium needed to go ahead and get that. But I definitely recommend doing that regardless as soon as you hit level 50, because it's a good reputation to be in, and this particular console boosts your turn rate, and I use it on pretty much every ship build that I have. Now, in addition to the other consoles, we have Neutronium Alloy Mark 10, which is just an armor console. You can really put whatever you want there as far as armor is concerned, as long as you have something there, just to protect yourself. It gives you a little extra survivability. This other console is one that I put on that's also from the Iconian story arc from a mission called Delta Flight. This one boosts turn rate and also the inertia. So increasing inertia in this game means that you don't power slide as much. So your ship keeps going the direction that you're pointing more accurately with the more inertia that you have. So that's kind of a nice little boost to that. Also helps you in slipstream, but honestly that's not really as much of a deal since they revamped sector space. Now here we have 5 particle generator consoles. You're not misreading this, those are all there to boost particle generation, which in this case increases exotic damage. So this boosts both the secondary deflector proc there, that 3500 damage, as well as each of these damage amounts here, from the gravity well, the tractor beam repulsors, the jam sensors, which is more of a placate anyway, and then the tractor beam. So all of those deal some sort of damage. Jam sensors probably doesn't deal damage so much as just turn off their systems, so they can't deal damage. But in any case, the damage dealing of the exotic abilities is increased by particle generators, so we wanted to put as many of those as possible on this ship. And since it does have 5 science consoles, it lets you really maximize that. Now, the other pieces here that we have are this biomolecular disruptor beam array. So this I mostly put on here to show you that the proc is actually a little bit better than your average plasma beam, which is kind of another preferred weapon type. This has a 4.5% chance to basically give you 638 damage that ignores shields completely. That's sort of a one-time thing. It's not DPS, it's just like a one-time burst. But it happens, at a 4.5% chance with the biomolecular disruptor beams or the biomolecular phaser beams. Also, there are biomolecular torpedoes as well, but we won't get into that. So this is just to show you that the radiation damage from this console actually does boost the damage caused by that proc. So because we have all of these different things going on, everything just kind of fits together, because you have the radiation damage boost, you have disruptor damage, transphasic, exotic boost here, we have a decent turn rate and some armor. So this is really as much as I could cram into this ship without getting crazy with fleet consoles and gear that's a little bit more in the reputation side of things that I didn't really want to push into the starter builds here. So the last 2 pieces, if I didn't already say them, are that the deflector is a Solanae deflector, which also boosts particle generator skill, as well as the Solanae resilient shield array. You can really put whatever shields in here you want. For example, if you have to use a Marine shield to get that 2-piece bonus, I definitely recommend it, because that 35% boost to transphasic projectile weapon damage is completely worth it for this build. But right now, based on what I have this 2-piece 3.6 shield power setting boost from the Solanae 2-piece. Now, it's not really required, but it's one way to go. So that's basically my layout here. So let's move on to the next section. Okay, the last piece here that I want to show you is the space traits that I'm running that make an impact on your science builds. So Particle Manipulator, this is one that you get from leveling your R&D school for science, which you would do by going to your duty officer missions here, go to R&D, and then science. We scroll all the way down to the research project for science. You can run 3 of these at a time, but only start them once per day. And you do need certain duty officers to be able to do it, research lab scientists, there are a couple others. But basically you want to get that school to level 15 as quick as you can if you are a science captain or do like science vessels. So that gives you Particle Manipulator, which based on your particle generator skill increases your critical chance for your exotic abilities, as well as your critical severity for them. So this is something that I didn't even know about until a few months ago, but it's a huge boost and more than you would get on a science ship with directed energy attacks regardless. And since the majority of your damage is going to be dealt with exotic damage on this particular build, you're basically trying to increase that as much as you can. So, that being said, the other important trait here is psychological warfare. So this controls, well, it increases your control ability. So that will definitely impact your gravity well, your transfer beam repulsors, and the tractor beams themselves. So basically, the majority of the abilities on this build are affected by this. So that's definitely good. Now the other two from Space Reputation, now these are from the new Kara Reputation, so get those when you can, because they'll definitely help. When you're running full aux power, it definitely increases the effectiveness of these abilities. So you have extra damage resistance based on this for the auxiliary power configuration defense, and then we have the auxiliary power configuration offense, which is the same thing or the same idea for damage output. So that is kind of a nice boost. So those are really the four big ones. There's also this additional personal trait that you can get off the exchange, which after dealing a hull or shield heal, it boosts your exotic damage by 10%, and vice versa. So when you activate an exotic ability, it increases the healing effectiveness. So basically, this is one of those things that's not always activating, so you're not going to see a crazy difference. So this is still kind of overpriced in my opinion on the exchange, just because a lot of people do still want it. And it is kind of a nice thing to have as a bonus, but I wouldn't really rely on that to do any extra damage. So it's just another one to look out for, positive feedback loop. So those are the traits here. And now let's go ahead and move on to the battle performance.